By having Relina Peacecraft join the Romefeller Foundation as their representative and a symbol of peace, they are able to gain the support of the people and are justified in making the world nation a reality. Meanwhile, in space, colonial citizens opposed to Oz's colonial rule rise up in every colony and start a movement for independence under the name White Fang. The year is after Colony 195. Wars are intensifying and hurling the era towards drastic changes.
As of this day, I, Relina Peacecraft, have taken on the duties as Chief Representative of the Romefeller Foundation.
It goes without saying that the last episode of Gundam Wing Explained ended on a bit of a downer. With one fell swoop, Romefeller eliminated the biggest obstacle to their fascistic ideology. Well, until the next opposition to their fascistic ideology popped up. With the White Fang being led by the politician Hiro Yui's former aide, Kans Karante, a worldwide unification means nothing if there's a bunch of colonies that are now armed by the Earth, pointing their guns at the big blue ball beneath them. At this point, we're moving into the final act of the story, where we see our characters get their morality challenged and have to fight to even find out if the peoples of Earth and space even want the peace that some seem to be fighting for. Episode 4, The Endless Waltz. After the last installment of this series, fights have already broken out between White Fang and Oz, with Oz sending in the mobile dolls to try to mop them up. Then, Wu Fei comes in and starts wrecking shop, like he do. Essentially, White Fang's already created a level of conflict, which draws out Wu Fei to where Noin, who is waiting in a nearby MS transport, can talk to him. While he starts telling people to disarm while he's out in space, Noin talks to the big goof, and shockingly enough, she doesn't hate the guy anymore. Now, given what happened...
Because she's a woman. You saw I was a kid and you underestimated me. You're a weak soldier.
I'm starting to wonder if this woman's got more of an ability to forgive than the fucking Pope. Her goal is to get the Gundam pilots in a united front to basically create a third faction in this conflict to stop the madness. For those of you who remember the last episode, this is something that both her and Catra agreed that they were going to do together. I'm assuming that they just separated out to divide and conquer, so to say. Either way, Wu Fei isn't really a fan of the idea and responds to it about the way you'd expect him to.
Sounds like something a woman would say.
Over with Duo and Hildy, Duo's brain's a bit racked over what happened to Troa and basically the uncertainty of the future. Hildy does the good girlfriend thing and encourages Duo to just keep doing what's right and tries to help him find a normal job. They come across a job posted by the Winter family of all people, and Duo knows that this is Catra trying to get his attention. So, the two reunite and catch up on things. Basic idea that Catra has at this point is that they gotta fight, but the end goal is peace. I suppose that Catra here is channeling Ulysses S. Grant, basically saying, I've never advocated war, except as a means of peace. After all this, Catra goes looking for Troa, because he's the next guy on the list to find. And he ends up finding him at the circus, tending to the lions, and of course Catra gets all teary-eyed. Granted, I can understand the tears, considering Catra thought he murdered the dude. Troa's sister is not too pleased at the development, because she doesn't want him to go back into the fight, and remember all the stuff from his past. Hey, Mexican Wu Fei, why does she want this? Porque ella es una mujer. Even after Catra leaves, trouble comes knocking. Oz and White Fang troops are fighting outside the colony, and it's about to spill inside. Things are falling, people are panicking, Troa almost gets crushed.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
And Troa himself can sense something terrible coming. Catra manages to catch up with him again to try to get he and Catherine the heck out of there. Though Catherine's busted up about what's happening, Troa vows to protect her, and Catra remarks on the Gundam's purpose, to protect the people of the colonies. At this point, he takes off on Sandrock. Now, the footage that you're seeing honestly speaks to Catra's skill in this damn mobile suit,
because you have to keep in mind that the Sandrock at this point has not been upgraded for space combat. It doesn't have the proper thrusters to let it move as well as it honestly should be able to. But we see him here absolutely destroying suits that are space compatible with a suit that isn't. For those of you who are Universal Century guys, this would be like taking a Gundam ground type into space and kicking the ever-loving crap out of something like, I don't know, a Rickdom or something like that.
That's insane skill.
Oh, hamburgers!
But all good things come to an end, I suppose. Regardless, Troa begins to leave to help out, and one memory comes back to him. It's when Hiro told him to live according to his emotions. Troa promises to come back alive, Rhythm of Motion plays in the background, and Troa takes the MS Transport Shuttle to join Catra in his mission, finding Catra actually, well, he did win. Making, of course, what just happened even more impressive. You're not going to find a lot of mobile suit pilots using mobile suits that are effectively just made for ground combat in space against space mobile suits and fucking winning. That's nuts. Anyway, back on Earth, Dorothy's here to talk some trash to Relina as she walks her to her coronation as the Queen of Romefeller. At this point, the speech that we played at the start of the episode takes place, and here's the cliff notes. Everyone needs to disarm at the order of Romefeller, and all national borders are effectively gone. Now there's just the world nation. That's, of course, under the control of Romefeller. And she gets a round of applause from the Romefeller Foundation. No surprise there. Cast in shadow, Trace Kusranada knows how much of a risk this move is, and over with Hiro and Wing Zero, Hiro's disappointment in what Relina's doing is rather obvious, because he's probably thinking the same thing that the audience is. This isn't going to solve anything. It's almost as if saying, everyone please stop fighting, this fighting is meaningless, really isn't going to do anything when everyone else wants to go to war and they have the means to do so. It's almost like just preaching or making flowery speeches as a Gary Stu and a Mary Sue isn't going to do shit. It's almost like these sorts of sentiments are completely ignorant of human nature and sound like the rantings of a bored housewife who loves NTR plots and thinks that what Gundam needed was writing on par with a YA novel. I am never stopping. After all the insanity of the previous episode, we find Oz soldiers talking about their new role as the Queen's Honor Guard, while a certain platinum blonde gentleman sips coffee and discusses how lost he feels. Yep, Milliardo's here, and he's got some visitors. Specifically, Cans is on Earth to talk to Milliardo. The gist of the conversation here is that Cans wants Milliardo to join White Fang, and bring Epion with him since Gundams are a sign of rebellion to the colonies, and states that the goal of White Fang is Hiro Yui's vision. Now, we know from previous episodes here on Gundam Explained that Shirt Dude and I have done that what Cans is saying is bullshit, since Yui believed in pacifism like Milliardo's father did. The thing is, Milliardo is a soldier without a country, and without a fight. Doesn't know what to do with himself. He leaves the coffee shop, and we see Epion waiting in the snow. As for the fucksticks in the Romefeller Foundation, Dermail is basically talking like they're going to gear up for another battle, this time, of course, with White Fang, which was likely his whole goal all along, just to basically unite everybody for the big fight that was about to happen. However, the speech is interrupted by Marquis Wayridge. Now, some of you might remember the Marquis, but some of you might not, so I'll give you a reminder. He showed up early in the series as an old friend of Relina and Milliardo's family, and he and the other Foundation members attempted to shield Relina from Lady Un after Relina tried to shoot her. Of course, saying many of us here are great fans of that girl. At this point, Wayridge plays politics and calls Dermail's BS in regards to appointing a queen. The basic gist of his statement is, we have a new chief representative / queen in Relina. The fuck do we need you for? Just retire, you old fuck. Though they're not going to force retirement like Dermail did with Treize. They would rather go the democratic route. Now, as you can expect, Dermail holds his ground. This old man ain't retiring, and the move just doesn't go anywhere just yet. The Foundation split in regards to being for or against Relina's ideas, and oddly enough, Dorothy Catalonia is saying she's on Relina's side, and there should be a push for Relina to take over the Foundation. Effectively, what Dorothy's doing is manipulating what we knew from early on in the series. Relina's got a good amount of support, and as we all could figure, she'd moved the Foundation towards total pacifism, and now could do it much easier. Some people might have missed this, so you're more than welcome to go back to previous episodes. I made a point to mention in each installment of this series of Gundam Explained that there is quite a few nations that would much rather have total pacifism at this point because they have basically seen their entire world in a consistent state of war for years. Effectively, Dorothy's grandfather's Batman gambit with Queen Relena is failing him, probably because he was too ignorant to realize how much support Relena actually had. With that, Dorothy knows that the first big test for Relena's beliefs would be the militaristic White Fang. Effectively, all eyebrows is testing Relena's belief systems again to see which one is superior. Out in space, Trilla, Catra, and Noin are getting caught up, with Noin letting the guys know that Wu Fei is being stubborn again. Next thing on the agenda is to get Sandrock properly kitted out for space combat. As Hildy walks around in her colony, she sees that the White Fang guys are out and about, and they found Duo, and are trying to get him to enlist. They try to threaten him, and that goes over about as well as a Catholic sermon at a furry convention. So Duo realizes he needs to get out into the fight, and he doesn't want Hildy getting caught up in it. I won't spoil the conversation, it's a good one, but the basic gist is that where Duo's gotta go next is off to war, which by nature can be a very lonely thing for a pilot. At this point we can see the White Fang has undone the damage that Wu Fei did to the lunar base, and is now producing upgraded Virgo mobile suits. These are called the Virgo 2. The WF-02MD Virgo 2 is the obvious successor to the original Virgo mobile suit. These were originally about to be put into production by Oz, but with the rather cathartic demise of Tuberov, White Fang is more than happy to put them to use. Now the main difference between the Virgo 1 and 2 is that the second one has more versatility. Given the Virgo 1's weakness in close-range combat, the Virgo 2 is given a couple of beam sabers in case someone gets past the planet defensors. It can also equip a cartridge-fed beam rifle with a much higher rate of fire than the Mega Beam Cannon. Plus, it's got a neat little color palette. It also has greater mobility given to it by a couple of shoulder-mounted thruster pods, clearly inspired by the Tall Geese. Effectively, it's the most versatile mobile doll yet. Now while they're cruising through space, Catra, Troa, and Noin remark on the insanity of the war thus far, as they fly near a completely destroyed colony. It's at this point that they get attacked by Oz, who didn't even confirm their identity before firing. To counterattack, Troa jumps the gun and deploys in a Taurus, and despite his amnesia, starts off pretty strong by dual-wielding a beam rifle and a beam cannon, and shooting the ever-loving shit out of the Oz troops. I guess muscle memory is indeed a thing. Catra and Noin set the shuttle to self-detonate and get moving in Sandrock and the other Taurus. Now Sandrock is still struggling with mobility a bit, but his backup is doing what they can against Oz's superior numbers. Now worried that Troa is diving in too much during the fight, even though he's managed to kill some suits, he realizes that he can't get to Troa fast enough to back him up because eventually he's going to run out of ammo. So what Catra does is he uses the explosion of the self-detonating shuttle to accelerate himself and get there quite literally just as Troa, runs out of ammo, and, chucking his weapons didn't work either. So, shoulder tackle! It was super effective. Now after the shoulder tackle, it's here that they run into a shadow. Well, that shadow reveals itself to be none other than Deathside Hell. After making his heroic entrance, Duo gets right to work at annihilating some mobile dolls, and kills the commander of the enemy forces, first by chucking a mobile doll into him, then hitting him with the Buster Shield. So, now we're at a point where we got 3 out of 5 Gundam pilots, with 2 out of 5 Gundams that they pilot in space. Plus, Noin is there too, and she's not too shabby herself skill-wise. On Earth, we see Wing Zero taking flight, and we hear some familiar words from Hero. Basically, he plans on killing Relena to get rid of this fake peace that Romefeller's bringing around. Now still in space, our good buddy Howard is still at the helm of Peace Million, breaking down the 5 sides involved in the conflict, or at least as he sees it. First you have White Fang, who have the space station Libra, then you have the Oz Space Forces, who still maintain control of Barge, the Gundam pilots, the colonial citizens not associated with White Fang, and then finally Peace Million itself. Now it's Howard's intention to team up with the Gundams like Zex wanted, but he wonders exactly what happened to Zex at this point. Last he knew, Zex flew out in Wing Zero to go try to help out the Sank Kingdom. Still, he contacts Duo, and thus begins the alliance. After all that, we see the Gundam pilots with Howard on Peace Million later on, and that he's already started upgrading Sandrock, remarking that they also need to find the heavy arms. On Earth, Romefeller is doing Romefeller things, and preaching peace by shooting people, because that's what hypocrites do. I don't even need to say it at this point, do I? Suddenly, Wing Zero's here, and makes very, very, very short work of the Oz forces and their Virgo units. This is basically what Hiro expected to happen, by the way. You know, the absolute total hypocrisy that comes whenever you start preaching peace and then do it at the end of a gun barrel. Again, I don't even need to say it, just know that I'm not stopping. Now the thing is, Relina is also fully aware of this too, making her a better character than Lacus Klein, no I'm not stopping. However, as Relina is talking, Marquis Wayridge is continuing to help push the Peacecraft way of doing things. As you'd expect, Duke Dermail doesn't like this one bit because he's basically Benito Mussolini. Thing is, we in the audience know that Relina has a point whenever it comes to the fact that Romefeller's ways of doing things don't fucking work. You can try to create a sort of peace, quote-unquote, through pure force, but because you're stomping on human rights, uprisings will inevitably come forward. It's in this meeting that Dermail's starting to realize that his gambit with Relina is completely falling apart. And of course, in a later meeting, Eyebrows talks to Grandpa later, basically mocking him for how dumb his gambit ended up being. So she tells Grandpappy to head to space and gather his military powers behind his banner. She then goes and tells Relina what's going on, that Grandpappy's out in space, and it's time to deliver the speech to Parliament. Unknown to Relina, Hiro has made his way into the building and intends to assassinate Relina, since he's under the impression that what she's doing is going to be playing right into Dermail's hand, given what he already saw, but not knowing that Duke Dermail is headed into space with his tail between his legs. Now, in space itself, Wu Fei is once again doing Wu Fei things, and attacking Libra by himself. Now, Wu Fei's caught them with their pants down at first because the majority of the forces that White Fang has are actually headed to Barge to bring it down. Now, as we could expect, Wu Fei's going to do quite well against Taurus mobile dolls, but given how well armed the Libra is, he cannot get close to it without taking a massive beating, which he does. At this point, Colonel Sedici of the White Fang, along with Cans, have no clue why the Gundams want to fight them. And then we see a familiar person with a familiar voice is commanding the White Fang. Back with Relina, it's time for another speech. With Dermail out of the way, Relina's got a captive audience for her speech on what needs to be done to obtain a lasting peace, basically the Peacecraft method. The basic idea is that there needs to be a mutual disarmament between Romefeller/Oz and the people that they've been fighting against, and then a move towards unification with the space colonies to quell the hostilities there. At this point, she sees Hiro in the balcony, with a gun pointed at her. Now at this point, when she sees this, her speech has been met with absolute silence, so she was resigned to her fate. But then something happened. After the applause, Marquis Wayridge offers his congratulations, and Hiro lets her live, knowing that she's actually succeeding. However, White Fang has something else to say. Now, Cans addresses the Earth and the colonies, and uses Wu Fei's attack on White Fang as propaganda to show the colonies that Earth is lying. Now, we obviously know that that's not true, that's why I use the term propaganda. Effectively, they took Wu Fei's aggression, and because, well, to be honest, the current new leader of White Fang is a lot smarter than Wu Fei, he uses this to throw blame on Earth to continue the war. It's at this point that White Fang announces the attack on Barge is about to commence, and their first target is none other than Duke Dermail. Even after deploying Virgo 1s, it's not enough to stop the opposition, and Duke Dermail is assassinated. Bye-bye. At this point, Cans announces the new leader of White Fang, and it's none other than Miliardo Peacecraft, and he declares that he will eliminate Earth, the place that stands in opposition to the colony's existence. Looking at the giant monitor in front of him, Hiro remarks that Zex is going forward with one of the futures that Epion has shown him, and the one that Hiro has chosen from what Zero showed him is to fight against the White Fang. After this, we see that Treize Kushrunada has seen the same speech, and dons his cape once again. Now, some of you might be wondering exactly why it is that Miliardo would join the White Fang. Admittedly, it's not something that he's super forthcoming about during this point of the show. I hinted at it earlier, but I want to take a little bit more time to make it obvious.
Miliardo is a soldier without country. Think about all the stuff that he went through to secure the independence of the Sand Kingdom at the start of the show. Think about that long path of revenge. And then after all of that, he goes out to try and promote peace in the colonies by speaking out against Oz, and that doesn't work at all. At this point, Miliardo has one enemy that's left. That enemy is Romefeller. When it comes right down to it, White Fang is the only group that has the numbers and the technology on top of the firepower to wage a war against that group. That effectively now controls the Earth. As far as Miliardo sees it, if the Earth is Romefeller, then the Earth is his enemy. I've heard some people criticize the show for saying that his heel turn comes out of nowhere, and I honestly think that some people might not have been paying as much attention to what Miliardo is doing, and what's happening to him during the course of the show after the fight in the Antarctic. Now, I will admit that if you don't know the background lore of the show, White Fang definitely seems to come out of nowhere, because it certainly felt that way before I knew the background lore when I first watched this show ages ago. But anyway, if you do take every element of the story into account, it does make sense as to why he would want to do something like this. The next phase of the war is the Battle of Barge. This is a desperate defense for Oz because, first, Barge is their last line of defense in space, and second, they don't have proper weaponry for fighting Virgos. Oz's mobile dolls are starting at a disadvantage. As you can see here, the laser cannons that they're using are effective in burning through the shields of Virgo 1s and Virgo 2s, but they overheat, explode, and then leave the suit without options. So the fight starts out well already for White Fang, and then Miliardo shows up in Epion to basically add insult to injury. Now, as you'd expect, Lieutenant Noin is in a bit of a headspin because of her love for Miliardo and wanting to see what his reasoning is for doing what he's doing. To help the young lady out, Catra, Duo, and Troa go to back her up. Over on Earth, Hero is blowing things up again and seems to have a good grasp on Wing Zero's system at this point. It's here that he meets with Sally Poe, who has an early Christmas gift: heavy arms. As Hero deals with some more Oz hostiles, after talking with Sally a bit, she makes note that Hero's a bit more approachable than he used to be. Maybe, or on the other hand, Sally, you might be one of the few people on either Earth or space that doesn't want the young man dead. Anyway, over at Romefeller, everyone's in a tailspin. Marky Wayridge clearly has no clue what to do, but if you're in need of order, you're going to need this guy. Though Queen Relina believes it's her responsibility to make her brother stop what he's doing, that duty won't be as the head of the Romefeller Foundation. This is war, and to win a war, you need a commander, not a queen. As such, she is dismissed as queen of the Romefeller Foundation, and Treize takes control over the Foundation as its new chief representative. Now Relina is determined to try and talk her brother down, but Treize knows what the audience knows and just says it. She can't pull it off. At the same time, Treize tells her that she's free to go wherever she pleases, which is basically Treize saying, and I know that I can't stop you from trying to talk him down. Then again, that's not his fight, and Treize is smart enough to know not to pick a fight that he can't win, especially with women. See, folks, I didn't bring in Wu Fei to say because she's a woman. I'm progressing, I promise. I'm lying. Here's Wu Fei.
Because she's a woman.
Anyway, up in space, the battle at Barge is continuing, and while White Fang does have the mobile suit advantage, Barge itself has enough firepower to keep them from getting too close to it. Thing is, the commander of the fortress wants to let off a massive shot from Barge to try to kill off the White Fang's forces, even though they're only at 80% of a full charge. The Gundam pilots and Noin arrive, with Troa heading off to defend the civilian colonies in the area. Duo and Catra unsheathe their weapons, with Catra finally getting to go into combat with the Sandrock Kai. The XXXG-01SR2 Gundam Sandrock Custom, or as I'm going to call it for the rest of the show, the Sandrock Kai, is a space-equipped version of the original Sandrock. Now, the one notable thing about the suit, compared from the original, is the added verniers in the shoulders, back skirt, backpack, and legs, which give it more mobility in space. By and large, the television version has the same weaponry, but now also has a beam submachine gun that it can use, so it's got a ranged option in the field aside from the 2 missile launchers on each side of its neck. One thing to note about the Endless Waltz version of the Sandrock Kai is that it would sometimes wear an anti-beam coating cloak, like another melee powerhouse from the Universal Century, and one of my other favorite Gundams, the Crossbone X1.
Now, given that Kotoki designed the Endless Waltz Sandrock plus several suits from Crossbone, it's probably an homage to Kincaid Now's mobile suit, which is awesome, because Crossbone is great and needs to be animated instead of more seed crap. Anyway, it's at this point when Catra and Duo get into battle, and they're finally face-to-face with the Epion. And it's right when Barge is about to fire. Barge uncorks a shot, and everybody in a Gundam, plus Noin, manage to get out of the way. But the same can't be said in regards to a lot of the White Fang forces. One of the civilian colonies even gets nicked by the blast, much to Troa's horror. Because if that blast had been any closer, the colony would be gone. At this point, Miliardo goes on the attack and reveals that he's the one in the Epion, which the Gundam pilots did not know. Neither did Noin. Duo and Troa try to attack, but the Epion is able to parry their attacks and hold both of them off at the same time. When they all see Barge is going to fire another shot, Noin grabs Zex in a full Nelson and tells Catra and Duo to go stop Barge's cannon. Now, she does try to talk Miliardo down, but he is absolutely resolute in his convictions. Because of the Epion's superior power in comparison to Noin's Taurus, he just easily breaks free to go after Barge. And Troa has to cover Noin so she doesn't get herself killed because she's in such shock after what just happened. Catra and Duo are making mincemeat out of the mobile dolls, but they're not doing it quickly enough to get to Barge in time. The thing is, what they've done has carved a path, and Epion is a lot faster than them. So it blitzes right past them and then pulls off one of the craziest feats that a Gundam has ever done. He carves Barge's cannon clean open, and then some, with one big full power swipe from Epion. Because if you guys remember my breakdown of the Epion, it can take more energy from its generator and pump it straight into that sword, which lengthens the beam and makes it more powerful. But either way, he cleaves straight through Barge, all the way down it, causing a chain reaction that causes the entire station to explode. Between that and holding off both the Death Scythe Hell and the Sandrock Kai, it goes without saying that Miliardo just established himself and the Epion as the deadliest duo in all of space. Much to the chagrin of the guy whose actual name is Duo. In the aftermath of Barge, we see that Lieutenant Nicol is still alive, and so is Lady Un, who is still in a coma after, getting shot through the heart. And you're too late, you give love a bad name, etc. Okay, you had this song reference, let's keep going. Anyway, Treize goes to visit her and leaves her roses like a real gentleman. While she sleeps, Treize basically gives the idea that he's got to wage one last terrible war, and after it's done, it's going to be Relina's time to forge the future. From here, Treize takes the stand at Romefeller and gives a grandiose speech, the basic gist of it being that White Fang's declaration of war cannot go unanswered. So he proposes that the whole Earth unites to finish the battle. Relina is also headed up to space to basically do exactly what she said she was going to do. What we see at this point is that the White Fang is chasing off whatever's left of Oz in space. And it's kind of going as you'd expect until Wu Fei shows up and does Wu Fei things to the White Fang troops. He's still in the might makes right mentality, daring the White Fang to kill him to prove that they're right. The last remaining Oz soldier that he basically saved realizes now that the whole conflict is largely pointless. And then he kamikazes the last troop transport from the White Fang. After the fight, Ultron is very banged up, but a mysterious shuttle happens to find Wu Fei out in space. Inside the shuttle, he finds Sally Poe and Hiro, noting the complement of Gundams that the shuttle has on it. The destination is Peace Million, to reunite with the other Gundam pilots. Sally offers Wu Fei the resources to repair Ultron, and he can go attack Libra anytime he wants after that's done. Wu Fei does Wu Fei things as usual and won't commit to any alliances. At this point, the Libra space station has completed its construction, and the White Fang has surrounded Hiro and Sally's shuttle. 40 mobile dolls are launched, and Hiro says, shouldn't be a problem. Now, when I say Gundam Wing pilots are cracked out, this is what I mean. 40 mobile suits controlled by an AI that's superior to your average Oz pilot? I'll just have it done before you can say Char's your uncle. Hiro tells Wu Fei to take out Wing Zero, since Wu Fei feels he needs to fight the battle due to the fact that those troop transports are there for him. Hiro warns Wu Fei about the Zero system, but tells him that it'll show Wu Fei who his true enemies are, quote-unquote. Well, during the course of the battle, Zero shows Wu Fei just that. The two people that he sees are Miliardo and Treize, the two people willing to wage war in the place that he doesn't want war to be waged. During the battle, Miliardo gives a speech that basically gives the impression that his belief is that the only people really capable of living without war are those in space, and Earth is basically war's breeding ground. It's sort of like a twisted peacecraft parallel to Char's speech during Char's counterattack. So basically, unless the Earth is destroyed, Miliardo refuses to back down. Wu Fei at this point realizes that the best spot for him to be is with the rest of the Gundam pilots, and he commits to the cause. Then, Dorothy Catalonius shows up in a golden shuttle at Libra, and is about to get shot down until Eyebrows uses her silver tongue to convince Miliardo that she's on his side. After all that, Hiro, Wu Fei, and Sally join up with Peace Million. There's a happy reunion between all the pilots, plus Sally and Noin, and then Howard immediately gets the engineers ready to fix up the heavy arms and the Ultron. Wu Fei says Troa's not ready for the battlefield because Wu Fei's a dick, but Troa also admits that he's probably right. In one of the colonies, C421 specifically, the animals start getting restless at Troa's old circus. It's here that some of the Oz remnants have decided to take the colony over. Their demands are simple. Give back Libra, or we kill everybody. Now there's some discussion on Peace Million about what's going on, but Hiro knows that Miliardo isn't going to sacrifice any of his resources just to save that one civilian colony. Over at Libra, we see exactly that in action. Basically, Miliardo, as he's presenting himself, is willing to kill everyone on that colony, and Dorothy sees that potential genocide as, well, propaganda potential. Noin wants to believe that Miliardo would never do that, but reality is what it is. Or is it? You'll see in a bit. Troa sees his sister on one of the screens at the colony and wants to go into action. Thing is, Heavy Arms is sort of, well, naked at the moment, so he takes Wing Zero instead and heads to the colony, with Catra and Duo heading out to back him up, with Sandrock Kai and Deathside Hell. Now Libra's cannon is still in play, but Hero's aware that Relina is in space, and she may be the only person who could stop Miliardo from firing it. At least that's the implication. The head of the forces taking over the colony send Treize a message that this particular leader of these final Oz forces thinks that he can take back Libra with these fucked up tactics. Well, if you've been following this series up to this point, you know that Treize hates hostage-taking. So he basically says, yeah, you're not my guys, fuck off. It's at this point that Troa arrives with Wing Zero and starts unloading on the mobile dolls and the Oz troops. One of the Oz troopers points a gun at the colony, and it goes about as well as you'd expect it to. At this point, the Zero system has Troa seeing ghosts, and is showing him possible outcomes that absolutely horrify him, like, killing his sister. As the fight goes on and it continues to flood his brain with information, he almost takes a shot that would have damaged the colony. Thankfully, Catra comes in to shake Troa out of his funk.
Bradley, please! You're my accountability buddy! How will this make me look?
And manages to succeed at doing exactly that. The thing is, as that happens, all of Troa's memories start to flood back, and he remembers everything he forgot. All the memories with Hiro, Catra, the sister, the war on Earth, are all back in his brain, and the Troa we know and love is back in action. So yeah, Wing Zero just kind of cured amnesia. At this point, the Oz soldiers are planning on taking the hostages with them to make an escape, but that's not going to happen. Their mobile suits have already been cut to ribbons by Death's Scythe Hell. So at this point, Duo strikes an Obari pose and tells them to surrender. After this, Relina arrives at Libra to try and talk Zex out of firing the main cannon at the colony. Here's the thing. That was never the target in the first place. So in a sense, Noin was right. Except, it really is just, well, Miliardo is aiming at a bigger target. The Earth. At this point, Miliardo knows exactly what comes next, after firing at the Earth. It doesn't look like he hit a region that was full of people, but the massive blast seems to have destroyed an entire island and everything living on it. So Miliardo knows what comes next after that shot. The Gundams are coming for him. After all that mess, Miliardo finally meets with his little sister, and there's an argument that comes as you'd expect. But there's one part of this that's honestly kind of sad. It's where Miliardo hugs his little sister, and the affection isn't returned. And they can understand, obviously, why his sister's mad at him, but these two have not seen each other in this story since the Arctic. And even then, I don't think they actually saw each other. So when they finally get reunited, it's like this. It kind of hurts, to be honest with you. It's a very sad moment, to say the least. But after this one little bit of affection, Miliardo just shuts off all his emotions, becomes cold again, and basically has Relina confined to quarters that he has prepared for her. It does show that he still has a vulnerability to him. He still does care somewhere deep down, but all of that is just buried under his hatred for Romefeller and all of the endless conflict that has happened up to this point. Over on Peace Million, there's a debate on what exactly they need to be doing at this point and who to fight. Hiro is basic with a voice of reason, knowing that Miliardo sees them as a hostile force. So, as you'd expect, Miliardo has already sent an attack squad to Peace Million. For the first time since the beginning of the show, it looks like all 5 of the main Gundam pilots are going to be suiting up in their personal mobile suits to fight together. Now we get to see one mobile suit in particular get up and moving that I know you all love, the Heavy Arms Custom. The XXXG-01H2 Heavy Arms Custom is a newly outfitted version of the Heavy Arms that is now space combat capable. Like the Sandrock Kai, it has added verniers on the skirt armor as well as its backpack, alongside the verniers it already had on the shoulders to help with mobility in zero-G environments. On the television version of the Heavy Arms Custom, aside from the vernier upgrades, the mobile suit is now given a double minigun that is attached to its shield. As for the Endless Waltz version, we see that it's given a new paint job in a blue, black, and neon blue trim along with a yellow V-fin and shoulder mounts. The absolute mountain of Daka that is the Heavy Arms Custom Endless Waltz version has 2 Vulcan guns, 2 machine cannons in the neck area, 4 chest gatlings instead of 2, and a payload of 96 missiles. If the orcs from 40K had a favorite Gundam, this would be it. They would just paint it red again, because red goes faster. Anyway, Hiro just made me a liar. Apparently Wing Zero has to go take care of something. So, Noin joins the rest of the pilots to help them out. Now, each of the pilots peel off, and we start to see an issue. All of them are way too used to fighting alone. The only 2 that stick together are Noin and Catra, and Noin immediately notices that the programming of these mobile dolls is a little different, more strategic. Even though the pilots do manage to drop the mobile dolls and eventually win, they're taking a lot more hits than they're used to, with Heavy Arms even losing a complete arm. So is it Heavy Arm at that point? Anyway, Noin and Catra put their heads together and figure out that Zex used something to improve the system. At this point, Eyebrows comes in to talk some shit, offering Relina a gun to kill her own brother. She's a bitch. Anyway, to Relina's credit, she does the moral thing and refuses, so Dorothy locks her in a room. At this point, we find out that Miliardo's forces have lost, but the point of the attack was basically to use the Gundam pilots' own tactics that they used on Earth against them. It's a war of attrition, guerrilla warfare. Start beating on them more and more with different waves of mobile dolls as they sit out there waiting to effectively crush them over time as they continue to spend resources to try to fight the White Fang's people off. Now we see Hiro talking to his mobile suit, and Wu Fei is planking in space. Anyway, the guys are talking about Libra's tactics and seem to think that the best option is just attacking Libra head-on. Thing is, Catra knows that that could be a fool's errand, but what other options do they have? It's at this point, while this conversation's going on, that Hiro gives Howard 3 discs to put into Sandrock Kai. 3 discs that Howard is not really that happy to see. Over with Libra, Miliardo puts a big dumb helmet on Dorothy to cover her eyebrows. At this point, the Gundam pilots get ready for combat, including Miliardo, because they're headed straight for Libra. Hiro tells Catra that they've put the Zero system into the Sandrock Kai due to its ability to strategize for troop leadership. As you'd imagine, Catra's freaked out about this, given what happened last time, which was, well... not a positive outcome. Much as Hiro is capable of taking command, he's gotta focus on Miliardo or they're all toast. Epion is just too damn powerful. So, Catra's gotta take command and lead them to victory. The battle starts out and the same problem arises from before. The Gundam pilots are too independent for their own damn good. Thing is, with Dorothy's stupid helmet, she's able to direct all the mobile dolls with a strategic plan. As Hiro pointed out, he's gotta keep Zex occupied, so he does exactly that. The rest of the pilots are trying their usual tricks that have worked up to this point, but now it's not working. Now Noin, being the smart lady that she is, considering that she's the only one in here that has worked within an organized military, well, for a long time. I'm not counting Troa's, deep ops. But what Noin picks up on is the strategy that's being used is the same one that Romefeller used to bring down the Sang Kingdom. As a counter to this, Catra activates the Zero system, and everyone gets in gear immediately with much more organization than what Eyebrows was ready for. During the course of the battle, Catra and Dorothy figure out that each other is commanding the forces of the other team, but Catra's kicking her ass.
Who's doing this? Who could it be?
This is for all the times I got grounded!
Eat it, Eyebrows. Anyway, Dorothy gets pissed off, throws the helmet down, and commands Cans to fire Libra's main cannon at the Gundams. Now, to avoid the shot, Piece Million has to burn out some of its engines, and picking up on what's going on, everybody else scatters, and Milliardo's not too happy. Piece Million barely gets out of the way, but everyone is still alive, and the Gundam team, well, they did what they needed to do, and then some. As for the Libra, trying to pull that move that it did, in moving as quick as it did, then firing the cannon, has severely damaged the station. The battle between Milliardo and Hiro is a draw this time, so sure dude, go ahead and update the counter, but Hiro's overall forces have scored a victory here. So we'll update our Hiro and Zek's counter with another draw, but we gotta give Hiro some brownie points for this gangster as hell line.
Hey, Zex. According to Zero, you have no future. Is Epion telling you differently?
At this point, both Piece Million and Libra are going to be in a holding pattern until they get repairs done. As the pilots fix up their Gundams, Catcher gets rid of the Zero system, saying he doesn't need it. Duo warns Hiro about the Zero system's dangers, and he shockingly agrees. Sally and Noi note that resource satellite MO2 is the staging ground for Treize's forces, and they've basically grabbed every mobile suit that they've got and brought it into space for this fight. Well, anything that's space-capable, anyway. Up in space, we see that Hildy, of all people, is actually sneaking into Libra, saying she's going to, quote-unquote, fight in her own way. On Libra, Milliardo is fully aware that it's time for the final fight, at least soon, anyway. And he gives orders to leave the Gundams alone for now. Cans, however, is adamant that they've got to pick off the Gundams now, so he's already sent forces to destroy them while Milliardo heads to rest up. Dorothy, on the other hand, is showing Relina around the space base to just basically keep talking shit, and shows that they've rebuilt the Mercurius and the V8 as mobile dolls. The attack on Piece Million commences, and Hildy's managed to find Relina. Hildy managed to get some data on Libra to give the Gundam pilots that'll help in the battle, and she takes off after Relina refuses to leave. So Hildy shoots her way out of Libra in a red Taurus. Eyebrows, being a bitch, tells Cans to send out Mercurius and V8 after her. In the meantime, the guys are discussing battle tactics and playing chess, with Hiro being a bit dour about things. The battle alarm goes off, Gundam pilots head out to intercept the enemy. As you'd expect, the guys start wrecking shop immediately once they see these mobile dolls. Now that they're all fully repaired and strategically on the same page, these forces just don't stand a chance. However, Hildy gets attacked by the Mercurius and the V8. She tries to fight back, but she really doesn't stand a chance here. I'm pretty sure this is only like the second or third time she's been in a mobile suit in the entire series. Either way, she sends out a distress call and manages to get her message received by the Gundam pilots. Duo, being Duo, heads out to rescue the girl he likes so much. Now, even though her mobile suit is severely damaged, Hildy refuses to give up. Right as the V8 gets a shot off to finish her off, Duo intercepts it and saves the day. During the battle, as Hildy continues to retreat, she warns Duo that the dolls are programmed with the tactics that are used by the Gundam pilots that use to pilot them. As such, Duo's going to have one hell of an uphill battle. Thing is, these are just copies. Once Duo figures out the tactics that are being used by them, he picks off the V8 within close-range quarters, and then overpowers the Mercurius without much of an issue. With that done, the day is won, and the girl is saved. Now let's do a fun fact. Looking at this screenshot of this Piece Million assault force, I may have counted wrong here, but what I did count was 143 mobile dolls, plus the Mercurius and the V8, so around 145. But because I suck at math, let's give or take 10, right? Even so, these pilots so far in this conflict, in what is called the Eve Wars, have taken out a couple military companies worth of mobile dolls in this video alone. So, since all of this was a waste, Eyebrows talks some shit to Cans and just leaves him to his failures. As for Hildy, she's taken to the medbay of the Piece Million, and Duo lets Hiro know that Relina is on Libra. At this point, Treize is now coming to space with thousands of space mobile suits, and Treize is going to lead them from the front. It's at this point that we see Treize's personal mobile suit that he will use to lead the charge, the Tallgeese 2. Before I break the suit down, I love this line from Treize here.
Remember this for the future. A war with no civility only gives rise to massacres.
Anyway, let's talk about the Tallgeese 2. The OZ-00MS2 Tallgeese 2 was built from spare parts meant for the original Tallgeese, and is built also with a mixture of titanium alloy and Gundanium parts. The main difference between it and the original is the headpiece. Whereas the head of the original Tallgeese had a crest on it similar to a Greek Corinthian helmet or a Roman soldier's helmet, the Tallgeese 2 seems to have more of a plume like a medieval knight, and its faceplate is much more similar to that of Gundam. The Tallgeese 2 also has a blue color on the engines, the shield, the torso, the shoulders, and the hip armor. That's kind of an interesting choice, isn't it? Well, there's a reason for that. It's meant to resemble Treize's uniform. The plume, the knight's plume looking thing, Treize is a knight. Interesting choice, huh? Then again, Katoki, as a mobile suit designer, really likes themed mobile suits, so this just kind of fits right in. Now, also, one thing worth mentioning is in the manga Glory of the Losers, which is in the Endless Waltz timeline, the Tallgeese 2 has another Treizeism to it. It's actually armed with a heat saber on top of the beam sabers that it keeps hidden on the shield. If you look at the color of the grip, the guard, and the blade, it's meant to be a parallel to the same sword that he used to defeat Wu Fei. Other than that, the Tallgeese 2 has the exact same performance as the first Tallgeese, and the exact same armament. Dober gun, 2 beam sabers. It just looks dope as hell. Now back on Earth, the engineers for Romefeller are putting boosters onto a now repaired Wing Gundam, which if you forgot, got left back in Luxembourg with damages to its leg. So yeah, that's going to come into play later. With the Gundam pilots, they note that Hiro's left to go save Relina, which, as you'd expect, makes Wu Fei think that Hiro's a bit nuts. Now Troa tells Wu Fei to be nice when Relina gets there, and the look on Wu Fei's face makes me think that his brain just blue-screened at that very concept of being nice to a girl. Either way, Hiro manages to bust into Libra using a damaged ship from the assault force that they just, massacred. Kan's pissed, understandably so, but Miliardo was expecting something like this, and he already knows it's Hiro. So Hiro gets into Relina's room and grabs her, and they both go to talk to Miliardo. Now, after they track him down, they try the same routine of talking Miliardo down, but Big Brother shows Relina the massive force that Treize has brought to space. The basic idea at this point is that there needs to be one final war, one big, ugly one to show exactly how bad and how pointless this constant fighting is. If they don't do it, it's just going to keep happening all over again until, well, things just get worse and worse and worse, and then they're going to have another big conflict. So they need to either finish this here, or the dance continues. You could even call it a waltz, an endless one.
He said it! He said it!
Anyway, if humanity doesn't see where all this constant conflict is going to lead, no lesson ever gets learned. The funny thing about the speech is that Hiro gets it immediately, and he leaves. Relina's still a bit on the dark on things, but that's largely because she's the only person in this conversation that's not really going to even try to understand that everyone fighting in this conflict believes that unless this plays out, there can never be peace. Somebody's got to lose. Miliardo gives a warning to Treize as Treize and his forces approach, saying that he'll fire Libra's main cannon if those forces don't stay back. So Treize tells his men to stay, but he heads out on his own. On approach to Libra, Treize challenges Miliardo to a duel, Epion versus Tallgeese 2, which would have been awesome. Now at this point, Lady Un wakes up, and then shortly afterwards, a ship that we didn't see takes off into space. As Treize talks with Miliardo, Miliardo flat out refuses to duel Treize to settle the conflict, with Treize saying that ultimately that is the right decision. It's a little risky to have one of your commanders go out and fight the other commander, possibly lose, and then the whole war is over. Now that doesn't mean that Treize is going to stop, though. Earth is behind him, and he will not fall back. Miliardo plans to fire the main cannon of Libra at Treize, and even Dorothy's taken aback by how cold this is. Treize charges, and Libra fires its cannon. It's at this point that Wing Gundam knocks Treize out of the way of the blast, which manages to hit part of the Earth's forces and knock a big chunk out of MO2. As we see it, it's Lady Un who just saved Treize's life. Also, the whole thing was a ruse. There are now mobile suit carriers behind Libra, and it's going to be hit from both sides. Lady Un and Treize are reunited, and Treize, after this, gives the order to commence the attack.
Attention all units. Destroy Libra now.
At this point, the battle has commenced. Treize is on the field with Lady Un commanding from MO2. Both sides are completely dug in with their decisions. They will dig no more trenches, nothing of the sort. Everybody's going forward, forward, forward. Now, hidden in Libra's hangar, Relina and Hiro are hiding out to just stay safe. The two discuss the basic ideas of what's going on, and Hiro has no reason to get involved at this point of the fight, since the leaders of both armies are his enemies. Peace Million is also hanging back and weighing its options given the military power of both sides involved. They come to the decision that no matter what, Libra has to go down. With the Gundams coming out, Milliardo knows that he's got to deploy, or the Gundams are going to mess everything up. Even though the enemy is a bunch of space Leos primarily going up against mobile dolls, Treize's numbers are in the thousands. So if Gundams start getting involved on Treize's side, that's a big problem. So what Milliardo does is he goes out with a few Virgo units to head them off. Catra asks Noin to hang back and guard Peace Million since her mobile suit will not be able to keep up with what's going to happen here. Now Duo sees that Milliardo just has 3 escorts, but the way he's using them makes Duo look like a bit of a fool. Now Lady Un at this point informs Treize that the Gundams are on the field, but he's not going to think about them as allies. Milliardo's strategy at this point is to pick off Catra first, head of the snake sort of idea, and he's having success with isolating him. Though the Sandrock is also a close quarters unit, it doesn't really have the overall power to hold off the Epion and its escorts, which are doing a solid job of keeping the other Gundams at a distance while Zex makes chase. As for Libra, it's looking to outmaneuver the Earth's forces and just pilot straight towards Earth itself. Now Sally Poe, over on Peace Million, catches what's going on and realizes that the best option to stop Libra at this point is to use Peace Million as a battering ram. Milliardo moves to destroy Peace Million, but what he doesn't expect is Noin stands in between him and Peace Million, and she is willing to die to protect it. But the thing is, she's not willing to pull the trigger. Even so, this move ends up working. It psychs out Milliardo, who isn't willing to kill her to get to Peace Million. After that, at this point, Milliardo flees from the battle, cursing his perceived cowardice. So what does Peace Million do? So yeah, Peace Million manages to successfully ram into the Libra, disabling the cannon. Peace Million's crew evacuate, and now the White Fang have to try and win the battle without their biggest asset. Hero and Relina survive the ramming attack, and Hero realizes he's going to need Wing Zero for what comes next. Now, even though Libra's cannon is toast, Zex still has an idea, as do the other Gundam pilots. Catra's strategy is to take over Libra from within, but Wu Fei has other ideas and flies out towards the big part of the battle to finally have his rematch with Treize. Noin leaves as well, finally breaking down emotionally. Now at this point, Relina still wants to talk to her brother, but there's no way in hell that's going to work, so they move on. Duo does his thing, and he sneaks aboard Libra to see what's going on in the area, finding something that he wasn't expecting. More on that in a bit. The other 2 Gundam pilots are maneuvering around the Libra with different objectives, and it's at this point that Catra comes across Dorothy. As for what Duo found, it's the Gundam engineers. Basically, they got roped into helping White Fang and rebuilding the Mercurius and the V8, because if you remember, last we saw them, they were in the custody of the Trace faction, who many members ended up joining the White Fang. But regardless, they got roped into it. They were part of finishing the space station, and they also rebuilt the Mercurius and the V8. However, they are also the reason that the Libra's cannon cannot fire consecutively, and it constantly breaks. Hero manages to get to Wing Zero. Waiting for him is Milliardo and the Epion, who is found by Noin, who just wants to stay with him for a while. At this point, Milliardo states that the real crushing blow is yet to come. Now battle commences on the Libra, and Dorothy doesn't give a fuck that Libra's messed up. She's gonna keep fighting because she just loves her some war. Now that same war is still going on around Libra, as Wu Fei keeps turning mobile dolls into cutlets. At this point, Treize and Wu Fei finally lock horns. Now as you'd expect, this fight is just as much of a mental fight as it is physical, with Treize discussing his views on war. The 2 agree, without really much of a conversation about it, to a duel of blades. A gentleman's fight, if you will. A Gundam fight. No, not that kind. Anyway, the Gundam engineers want to do something to change Libra's orbit, because they know what he plans to do at this point. Drop Libra onto Earth. Yeah, he's planning to pull a Zabi, but if Libra and Peace Million collide with the Earth, it's going to be releasing a blast that's estimated to be 6,000 megatons. Way more damaging than the colonies that fell on the Earth during the course of the Universal Century. For comparison, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was 21 kilotons. So an explosion like this would be 28,571 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. We're talking about an explosion that would effectively carve a giant chunk out of the Earth and render it completely incapable of having life exist on it due to a resulting nuclear winter. On what's left of Peacemillion, Hero and Relina have one last argument about how all this is going to play out. Hero's thought is that there's no way that either Zex or Treize are going to give up at this point. Zex doesn't think he's lost, and this has to end only one way. Once Zex and Treize are gone, there can finally be peace. Effectively, these two men are the last two warmongers. Everybody else that you would consider a warmonger is dead, and that's why this has to be the last battle. Relina still doesn't want to let him leave, knowing his plan is that he's going to die in the process of bringing him down. All Hero asks at this point, with a smile on his face, is just to believe in him. Wing Zero's eyes light up. Relina says to him that she does believe in him, and Wing Zero launches one more time. In the Mobile Doll Control Center, we get the reason why the dolls were acting smarter. The Zero System. As of right now, the only thing that'll stop these mobile dolls is if Catra kills old Eyebrows here. Now at this point, we finally get why Eyebrows is so obsessed with war. Her dad was a soldier who died in combat, and this is effectively her coping mechanism. During the course of the fight, as expected, Dorothy tries to use psychological tactics to get Catra off his game. Elsewhere, Wing Zero enters the fight and shuts off the communications to his suit from Relina, who is still trying to talk him out of things. She does not give up. Inside of Libra, Troa and Duo are lighting up mobile dolls, but Duo's got his own mission, while Troa is heading out to try to find Catra and give him backup. Duo's mission is to escort the Gundam engineers to Peacemillion for their own purposes. During the battle, he gets surprising backup from the Magwanaut Corps. Yeah, always good to see these dudes, right? And obviously they're here for Master Catra. Speaking of Catra of Arabia, he's still in a sword fight with Dorothy, and not really doing that well. In discussion about exactly what her expectations were for the Gundam pilots, she suggested that they should have done exactly what Zex is doing right now, but, obviously Catra is resistant to that because he doesn't believe in the end that actually would have solved anything. And during all of this, Catra gets impaled by Dorothy. Thing is, what Catra realizes deep down and what he brings up to her is that he thinks that Dorothy actually hates what's going on. Hates that she's lost as much as she has, but she's convinced herself in her grief that all of this has to happen for wars to end. Catra, on the other hand, believes in something higher than that. That humans are capable of going beyond their base instincts and living in peace with one another. Something that Dorothy has a hard time swallowing. If war took her father, isn't that just a natural way of looking at things? Well, not really, but she didn't really realize that until she actually had to get into a fight and actually, almost kill someone. Wu Fei and Treize are still going at it, and the fight is pretty even. During the course of the fight, Wu Fei is laying out his disdain for Treize, and he asks a hell of a question of how many people have died for you. It's here that he gets an answer that he wasn't expecting.
Do you really want to know? Huh? As of yesterday, 99,822 people.
Over the comms, he asks Lady Un how many more have died today. And he says he wants to know all of their names after the battle. The reason? To remember them. He remembers everyone who has fought for him, everyone he has fought against, and everyone who has died for his goals, whether they were on his side or the opposing side. He remembers everybody that died due to a decision that he made. He remembers everybody that died fighting for what they believed in, because he believes that they're worth remembering. At this point, he charges Wu Fei, but the Tall Geese 2 is impaled on Wu Fei's blade. Now you'll notice that there's been a consistent thought that two people need to die for this conflict to be over and for war to stop. Treize and Zex. The Gundam pilots say it constantly throughout this whole sequence, but what you wouldn't expect is that it's a sentiment that Treize agreed with too. He fully came into this conflict knowing that he had to die. He knows that because of who he is as a man, that the world will not find peace if he's alive. So he threw himself onto the spear of a warrior that he believed would be able to help the world find peace. So as the Tall Geese drifts away, critically damaged, he calls Wu Fei his eternal friend, and says to Zex that he'll meet his old friend on the other side. It's at this point the Tallgeese 2 detonates, and Treize Khushrenada is laid to rest. Wu Fei weeps for him, because Wu Fei did not think he was going to survive the battle. At this point, seeing the death of Treize, Lady Yun surrenders, knowing that Treize has played out his role. At this point, Troa comes to get the passed out Catra, and Dorothy is just in absolute shock of the way things are playing out, because they weren't supposed to happen this way, according to her. Everything that she believed in is falling apart around her. There's only one fight left to happen. Zero versus Epion. Hiro versus Zex. One last time. Relina, Sally Poe, and Howard arrive on MO2 with the Earth forces safely. On Libra, the Gundam engineers have reached what's left of Peace Million, and Duo heads back out to start killing him some robots. Now at this point on MO2, Lady Yun offers a gun to Relina to take revenge for her father's death. Because again, remember in one of the previous episodes, it was Lady Yun who killed him. Now Relina refuses it, forgiving Lady Yun for what happened. Howard realizes what needs to happen to stop Libra. Alter its orbit, or just blow the damn thing up. Since he sees that Duo is by where you'd need to be to get one or the other done, he knows that his fellow engineers are likely already there, since they'd have planned this or came to the same conclusion that Howard did. As for Troa, he talks to Dorothy about why he's still fighting despite all the things that they've gone through, and he disconnects the systems in the room they're in. Troa picks Catra up, the two head off, with Troa tossing Dorothy her helmet, and Catra encouraging her to try and make it through this. The mobile dolls are done for, and for better or worse, the greater scale of the battle is over. MO2 is trying to reach Lieutenant Noin, and they manage to get her on comms. Un asks Noin for a favor. Show the footage of Zex and Hiro's final battle, and they will broadcast it all over Earth and space. Now, the Gundam engineers are doing their thing, but they get caught by cans. At this point, we get the lore that I gave everybody during episode 1 of Gundam Wing Explained. The original Operation Meteor was a colony drop, and these engineers have this little thing called a conscience, so that's not happening. Gundams are enough. At this point, the doctors don't care about their own lives, and they hit the button that detonates a section of Peace Million and engages its thrusters, killing them, killing cans, but completing their mission. With Hiro and Zex, they keep fighting with one another, bantering about how we got here, how the Earth's actions made the colonies weak, but also made them want to start a revolution to fight back against the Earth because they didn't want to be ruled by tyrants. Now, as this goes on, the colonies put out a declaration that rejects the White Fang's actions, makes it clear that they want peace with the Earth. Now, the downside is that, as they're saying this, a giant chunk of Libra has broken away from the rest of it, which is big enough to cause big problems, enough essentially to still cause a nuclear winter. Now, at this point, Zex and Hiro keep at it on that block of Libra that broke off, with the other Gundams catching up to them. Now, despite Zex basically having no military of his own now, no support from the colonies, he keeps going with the intent to settle with what he started. He will not stop. At this point, where we have one last clash of sabers, and Hiro ends up winning over Zex decisively. So, sure dude, where's the count at? Who is the true winner of these epic clashes between Hiro Yui and Zex Marquise? 2, and 2? Oh, that's kind of anticlimactic. Well, anyway, Catra gets in touch with Hiro, who refuses to kill Zex because it would break Relina's heart. The Gundam pilots at this point have resigned themselves to destroying the final block of Libra from the inside out. So we have the Gundams in the Magwanac Corps trying to blow it up with gunfire. But the most reliable thing that they can do is destroy the power source. Now, Wing Zero is there, but unfortunately for Hiro, his beam saber is screwed up, and he's out of ammo for his Vulcan cannons. His last option? Self-detonation. The thing is, Zex will not let that happen. He refuses to let Hiro kill himself for what Zex has done. And Zex consigns himself to die as a warrior, stabbing the power source. Now, even so, there's still a block of Libra headed to Earth. Luckily for Hiro, Wu Fei finds him, and he has the Buster Rifle, which obviously is going to have the firepower to destroy the last chunk of Libra heading to Earth. At this point, the Gundams in the Magwanac withdraw from the battle. On top of that, Wing Zero heads out and starts to enter the atmosphere ahead of what's left of Libra that needs shooting. Now the problem is, of course, the heat plus the turbulence from entering the atmosphere can make it very hard to lock on. Even so, he fires and pulls it off, firing a full power Buster Rifle shot, detonating what's left of Libra, and saving the Earth from destruction. At this point, Katra and the guys show their elation at Hiro pulling things off, with Katra flat out saying that it's Hiro who's the heart of outer space. Now, the rest of Libra that was descending to Earth is so small it's not going to hurt anything, and basically burns out like they're shooting stars. A peace agreement is reached between Earth and the colonies, and we see people on Earth grieving the losses of their loved ones. However, no one refuses to grieve Zex, because she believes he's still alive. Relina now goes by her last name Dorlin again, and she's now a foreign minister to the colonies. And working on her birthday, no less. As Relina gets on her shuttle, she sees a teddy bear with a card, and she realizes it's a gift from Hiro, who works on that colony. To get even with the guy, as the two meet each other's gaze, she tears up the card and says next time, hand it to me in person. Now that's a really wholesome way to end this series, isn't it? No more war, right? Right?
Incorrect.
Well, shit. Hey there, YouTube family. I want to apologize right out of the gate for what's going to effectively be a slideshow for the rest of the sequence of this particular video. The reason being is that, for some reason, Bandai will completely and totally copyright strike just about anything that is Endless Waltz if it's played in motion. I've actually re-uploaded this video about 7 times, meaning I had to re-render it, doing alternate versions over and over and over again to see what will stop the AI from flagging this particular video. I've tried to appeal directly to them, and they basically acted as if they will strike my channel if I continue to try to do so with any sort of actual animation from Endless Waltz. So, this next part has to be a slideshow, except for the things that aren't from Endless Waltz, but rather footage that Shirt Dude took from video games and things of that nature. So, again, I do apologize. If I have to do this sort of thing in the future for videos, what I will be doing is I will be putting a version of the video that does not have these kinds of cuts on Patreon or in my Discord server for members, patrons, Subscribe Star Bros, all you guys who give money to the channel on a monthly basis. So, something to consider. I am sorry about this, but it is what it is, and I'm just basically trying to get you guys the lore videos that you want so badly, and try to get them as true to what I think they should be as possible, but sometimes YouTube just will not let it happen, or the copyright owner will not let it happen, despite the fact that it does fall into fair use. To be honest, if I had the money to argue this in court, I would, but I don't, so it is what it is. So, let's go ahead and get on to Endless Waltz. So, a year later, we find ourselves in After Colony 196. The Earth and the colonies have unified into what's called the Earth Sphere Unified Nation. We're also at a point of near complete disarmament, with that a lot going on. However, we find Sally Poe in space, going by the call sign of Water, finding a big floating chunk of neo-titanium, which is the same material that most mobile suits are made of. Mysterious. Elsewhere, we see that 4 of the 5 Gundams that survived the Eve Wars have effectively been put in coffins, and are put into a disposal block to send them into the sun. The thing is, we don't see Ultron here. Katra and Duo send off the block, and that's effectively what these guys consider to be the end of any possible need for mobile suits. Now, over at MO2, which is still around, it is hosting a party to commemorate the anniversary of the end of the war, which coincides with Christmas. This is why some mecha fans call Endless Waltz the best Japanese Christmas film not called Tokyo Godfathers. We see some familiar faces here in Noin and Lady Yun, both looking pretty snazzy in those suits. Now, what the girls mention here is that they are part of a group that's called the Preventers that, well, put out fires. That's why Sally Poe was going by a call sign. All of them go by code names and basically act as a preventative force to make sure that no big conflicts get started. Over at colony L3X18999, which is a relatively new colony, they're talking with Relina about the possibility of colony growth and being honest about the fact that the colony is looking for strong leadership and is already having problems with economic consistency. They talk about having a strong leader like Relina leading them, and then suddenly Relina, after drinking some tea, gets very sleepy. Then a bunch of dudes in uniforms charge in and take her away. We then see a couple of figures, partially obscured in shadow. One of them is going to be familiar from part 1 of this series, Dakin Barton. The other is a little girl addressed as Lady Marimea. and she talks about some mobile suits left to her by her father as Christmas presents. More on these in a bit. Back in another spot, we see that Troa's back working at the circus with Catherine, and they've spotted some shady dudes in the crowd. So Troa does his solid snake routine, disappears from plain sight, and goes and kicks the shit out of them. He sees that they're all working for the Barton Foundation. Now in Endless Waltz, we do finally see the background of Troa in animation, and that he really is a man with no name, but I already went over all that in part 1 of the series. Since I know it's been a few months since that vid, you're more than welcome to go back for a refresher, because I do want to try and keep focusing on the current events, but I will talk about flashbacks that aren't as detailed in the prequel manga. Now, at another colony, Hiro's doing Hiroyui stuff looking into Marimere's background. Now, we already know that her mom, Lisa, that he mentions here, was a nurse looking after Treize when he took an RPG to his Leo defending General Septim. Oddly enough, that same RPG was fired by Hiroyui. He's joined by Duo and tells Duo that Relina has been kidnapped. It's here that we see this group led by Dakin Barton, which is called the Marimea Army. Now, Troa's already done what he does best and infiltrated the group, but Dakin's already realized what's going on when he's giving a Zabi-esque speech. Though Troa does manage to dodge a gunshot and pull a gun on Dakin, we find out where Wu-Fei was this whole time. He's joined the Marimea forces. Sally Poe gets in touch with Noin with info on what we've already found out, and Noin switches her rendezvous point to catch up with Sally. At this point, Relina wakes up and finally meets Marimea face to face. She reveals at this point that she is the daughter of Treize Kushranada, and looking at her and Treize's faces, you can kind of see the resemblance, of course with a bit of her mom too, and she claims that it's already been proven through DNA testing. She's under the impression that she's been chosen to lead the Earth sphere, and plans on starting a coup d'etat to take control of it. Now, one flashback I'm going to go over is one that we didn't talk about in part 1 that goes over Hiro's missions prior to receiving Wing Gundam. While him and Duo are in a ship to save Relina, Duo keeps yapping, but realizes that Hiro is asleep and dreaming. Now, in the dream, we see that after escaping a military base on an unnamed colony, he meets a little girl and her dog named Mary. The little girl gets sad at one of Hiro's lines about being lost since he was born. Given his dad's profession, we can understand that sentiment. But cheers Hiro up by giving him a nice little flower. Later that night, Hiro blows up the explosives that he had planted earlier in the day, completing his mission and successfully destroying the base. The thing is, a Leo falls over, blows up, and the one next to it falls over like a domino effect, hitting a bunch of residential buildings, likely killing everyone inside. The next morning, Hiro walks among the ashes as it snows, finding torn cloth, a burned teddy bear, and the little girl's dog lying dead in the rubble. It's here that we actually hear part of the conversation that likely led to the Gundam engineers deciding to alter Operation Meteor, with Dakin Barton basically ordering that Hiro be conditioned to blot out his own humanity and turning him into a killing machine with no sense of morality, which we know didn't actually end up happening. Hiro is a stoic. He has a sense of morality. We see that in the show. Now, when Hiro wakes up from his dreams, the colony declares its independence, and then declares war simultaneously. One thing you'll notice in this, especially if you go back to my 1 Year War series, is that a lot of these elements are supposed to mirror what Zeon did when they started the 1 Year War. Which, yes, Zeon started it. Don't you start with me, motherfucker. Anyway, Marimea reveals her assumed parentage to the shock of basically everybody, and the president of the Earth Sphere is pissed. Understandably so. Lady Une tells him that they were likely planning this before the Preventers were ever formed, and she's not wrong, but he hangs up on her anyway. Nice guy, I guess. So here's the lore tidbit. Lady Une's right. One thing you'll notice with footage in this particular movie is that we are seeing that the Marimea army has a bunch of Leos and Taurus suits, which later on we find out those Tauruses are actually mobile dolls. Now, both of those are models that would have been left behind by Oz or Alliance forces at different points of the conflict in the year prior. In fact, they're all colored in Oz colors. One of Dakin's priorities was mobile suit theft before the Eve Wars and all the conflicts in the show proper, and he was always a shadow player. What you can gather from Gundam Wing's prequel manga is that he never struck unless he was 100% sure he could pull off the job, and if he couldn't do it, he would pull out immediately and then clean up things to make sure that you never knew he was there. That's likely the reason he didn't join Cans in the creation of the White Fang, instead waiting to see how everything played out. The only reason that they found out when they did was because Dakin was ready to be found out. Anyway, a man in a tan suit walks into Lady Une's office and she looks up with a very audible gasp, almost like she's seen a ghost. The man has long, platinum blonde hair, and asks for the code name Wind, because it's known as something that puts out fires. Back in space, Noin hails a ship that's going straight into the fight to warn them, finding out that it's Duo and Hiro heading into the fight, which is, kind of what they do. To Noin's shock, they're 100% sure they can handle this with just the two of them. And if I could ask a fictional character a question, I would ask Lieutenant Noin in this moment two things. One, how do you keep your hair in such a perfect coif that it doesn't get in the way of your vision? And two, given all that you've seen these guys do, would you really be that surprised if they pulled it off? Anyway, Sally and Noin head in as well to try and draw fire off of them. Though it's a bumpy ride, Sally and Noin's ship is armed with beam weapons and a massive payload of heat-seeking missiles, so they can provide solid cover fire for the Gundam pilots, who successfully do get into the colony. Now over with Catra, the Magwanac Corps are with the young master with a ship, prepared to go and try to catch up to the Gundam disposal block. Back on the colony, Hiro and Duo are already on the attack, having snagged a couple of Leos. Now, as we all know, the main characters in Gundam Wing sort of work like named Space Marines in Warhammer 40k. The Leo isn't that great of a mobile suit compared to other suits that Oz offers, or to a Gundam. It's comparable to a Hyzak or a Marsai in the Universal Century. Now, in the world of writing, sort of like unnamed Space Marines in 40k, you shouldn't be surprised if you see Leos get peeled apart, sort of like you see unnamed Space Marines get peeled apart in cutscenes for games like Dawn of War 2. However, if a capable pilot, like Duo or Hiro or Zex get into one, they're going to have enough skills in lore and plot armor in the writing to do some damage. After the start of it, the two of them split up. The first thing Duo does is he runs right into the new mobile suit, the Serpent. The MMS-01 Serpent was meant to be a direct successor to the Leo, and had a similar level of adaptability. Easily capable of carrying equipment for either space or ground combat, these suits are very customizable. The only interior weaponry that the suit has are two 8-tube missile launchers hidden in the shoulders of the suit. Every other weapon was one that could be traded between suits, mounted on the back, and carried with relative ease. It could equip an over-the-shoulder bazooka, a handheld beam cannon similar to those like the V8 and the Virgo used, or a double Gatling gun like the Heavy Arms Custom uses. It also apparently carries a beam saber, but we only see it in video games. Either way, Duo immediately starts taking fire from the Serpent, but he notices something about the way the suit's being used. Specifically, the stance that it's standing in is identical to Heavy Arms, with Duo realizing that Troa is piloting it. While Hiro seems to be having luck in another part of the colony, he gets a dragon fang sent right at his head that he just manages to dodge. Yep, Wu Fei brought an otaku with him into the colony. At this point, it's a nightmare scenario. The Marimea army not only have two Gundam pilots seemingly fighting for them, they also have a Gundam of their own, and nobody else does. Now back with Catra, it's looking like it's going to take about 5 days to catch up with the Gundams. This would be way too damn long. At that point, with the size of Marimea's forces, she would be able to get a foothold that they wouldn't be able to penetrate. Catra then plots a course that'll shave off 80 hours, which basically means he can cut the trip down to about a day and a half. Given the current circumstances, it's the best option, considering the Marimea army is the only army in existence right now. There's no real good counterforce. Now, the problem they run into is that they're going to have to blow up a part of the ship to really hit the rendezvous point and only have 5 seconds to get onto the ship itself. Given that timetable, Catra refuses to take anyone with him despite the protests of the Magwanac Corps. Back on the colony, the battle commences with Wu Fei asking Hiro the question of, are you guys doing the right thing? Now, Hiro's able to hold him off for a little bit, telling Wu Fei to destroy his Gundam in response. As for Duo, he gets riddled with bullets and missiles that are shot at him, and he sees his life flash before his eyes, which shows a flashback of him immediately wanting to destroy Death Scythe on the eve of Operation Meteor, given he knows that the original Operation Meteor would kill billions of people. It shows that instead, Duo and his doctor had planned to go against the mission as well very early on, with the doctor dismantling all the explosives that Duo had planted. Now, all the doctors came to the same consensus, which is why the original Troa Barton gets a back full of lead. As for the missiles, they don't hit Duo. Hiro manages to escape with the resulting explosion, which covers his escape, and then Duo heads out as well, with their mission, at least destroying the mobile suits of the Marimea army, largely being a failure. The Preventers at this point are waiting for backup from the moon, and they confirm that the Taurus suits are mobile dolls, meaning that the main force is located somewhere away from the colony. We see that these forces are located at Resource Satellite MO3, with Dakin bragging about Cans being a nerd At the colony, we basically get Relina trying to talk down Marimea, which goes over about as well as playing Slayer in the middle of a convent. Hiro and Duo are scoping out Marimea's action in the colony, and the two realize that what Marimea's troops want to do is pull off the original Operation Meteor, the colony drop. Back with Catra, he manages to get into the transport that was carrying the Gundams, but not without a bit of a scare. Seeing the Preventers starting to move out, Dakim calls the Preventers a bunch of nerds too, and orders the Serpents to be deployed. The thing is, something is coming at them at very fast speeds. A fucking tall geese. Dakim knows it isn't Trey's, and he realizes what the audience already figured out from earlier. Not only is Zex Marquis alive, he's got a brand new mobile suit, and he's fucking pissed. This mobile suit is one of my favorite master grades I've ever got to build as a Gunpla builder. It is the OZ00MS3 Tall Geese 3, and it's a fucking monster. To put it simply, though it's part of the Tall Geese line, it might as well be the love child of the Tall Geese and the Epion. This mobile suit still maintains the thruster power of the original Tall Geese and Tall Geese 2, and a similar body design, but has a new head and shoulder design with a crest that's likely an homage to Char Aznavour's helmet in the original Mobile Suit Gundam. And I'd argue that this suit is just as terrifying, if not more so, than Char's final mobile suits, the Sazabi or the Nightingale. On top of just being absurdly fast, on its right arm the Tall Geese sports a Mega Cannon, which is considerably more powerful than the Dober gun. It functions similar to a VSBR on the Gundam F91 or the Buster Rifle on the Wing Zero. It can fire off smaller shots like a normal beam rifle, but can uncork a much bigger blast in what's called maximum output, where it's comparable to Wing Zero's destructive capability. The shield it carries is also larger than the original Tall Geese's, and carries two concealed beam sabers like the original. On top of that, it also has a heat rod, just like the Epions. Plus, this suit has a system inside it that is similar to the Epion system. In fact, it was its precursor. It's never named, so I guess we'll call it the Tall Geese system. Speaking of how terrifying this goddamn thing is, these pilots of these ships here find out very fast. Zex goes apeshit, literally carving through troop transports like they're nothing, and even reduplicating his infamous slash on Barge. It's here that Zex drops his coldest, most gangster line to Dakim Barton.
Zex Marquis! I thought you were dead.
That's right, I was. But I find that I cannot quietly sleep in my grave, while Trey's spirit is still roaming among us.
Now, Dakim actually dares Zex to shoot him down. If he does, they'll drop the colony, and basically do the same damage that Zex himself was willing to do when he was going as Milliardo Peacecraft during the Eve Wars. Something you can tell Zex wants to avoid. As Wu Fei looks down from the colony, he takes off to escort Marimea's shuttle, as she tells Relina that she fully plans to drop that colony, unless Earth bows to her. On top of that, she fully intends to use Relina to hand over the Earth to her as well, because with Relina's popularity, if she says, hey, we're all with Marimea now, they will likely mostly agree. Now, on the Gundam satellite, Catra manages to get the big sucker turned around and headed back to Earth, so he and the other pilots can mount some form of a defense against what Marimea and Dakim plan on doing. Hiro and Duo at this point are just doing what damage they can to try to sabotage things for Marimea's men. They meet up with Troa, who's already trying to prevent the colony drop. Hiro and Duo join in a hacking party to try and stop this thing. Still, they finally manage to succeed in their mission, blowing everything up that they need to stop the colony from being able to be dropped. After the Preventers get confirmation that Operation Meteor has been stopped, we see what I meant when I compared the Tall Geese 3's destructive power to Wing Zero. With one shot, the Tall Geese destroys MO3, which is similar to what Wing Zero did when it first was unveiled, destroying one of these big-ass resource satellites. Now sadly, Dakim Barton has escaped. Catra hails the other Gundam pilots to let them know he's got the Gundams, and Hiro asks Catra to send Wing Zero to a different point that'd be a lot faster. He then asks Duo to smack him, which he no-sells and then knocks out Duo. Hiro, of course, plays possum, then books it out of there. At this point, Dakim has landed on Earth, and so have his forces. However, Wing Zero has been sent out towards Hiro, who is quickly approaching in a shuttle of his own. He catches Wing Zero, and we get one of the coolest unveilings of a new Gundam design ever. And I have to say, if you want to see the best version of this unveiling, you have to watch the movie version of Endless Waltz, not the OVA, because the unveiling of Wing Zero when it spreads its wings is done to the tune of a Last Impression, and it is very impactful, let me tell you. Either way, Hiro now has his mobile suit in which he heads off to Earth. Now over in Brussels, we see that Marimea's house goes into the ground, or rather the presidential estate which she stole. At this point, Marimea talks about the Endless Waltz of War, Peace, and Revolution, and how it consistently goes because that's human nature. But all that's going to end when she rules the world with an iron fist, going back to the whole concept of rule and control that her father preached before his death. And of course, ultimately, realized wasn't going to work, which is why he fell on Wu Fei's trident. Wu Fei, he gets a flashback to stuff we already talked about in episode 1, with the colony that he lived on originally being the one that they were going to drop on the Earth because the Alliance were already going to destroy it. Now at this point, it's time for a showdown. Wing Zero versus Ultron. Hiro versus Wu Fei. Now, the fight between these two largely takes place while Hiro is trying to talk some sense into him, but more on that in a bit. Duo manages to escape his confines with his usual tricks, then gets into a shuttle where Troa is, where he's been waiting for Sally Poe, who had freed the army's hostages, and then the three of them take off. Now, the fight between Wing Zero and Wu Fei starts pretty even, but Wu Fei pulls ahead. Where Wu Fei's at with things is not really a good spot mentally. His only purpose, in his mind, is to be a soldier. To fight. It's literally all Wu Fei knows how to do. And we've seen that since the start of these videos. This is a guy whose only skills in life are killing and fighting, and then fighting and killing. He's a martial arts master, and a skilled assassin, on top of being an ace pilot who has shot down hundreds of mobile suits. Wu Fei is one of the most lethal Gundam pilots in the entire Gundam franchise. That is all he knows how to do. Now, with the peace that they've attained, now he's being asked to take his sword and turn it into a plowshare. And he doesn't know how the fuck he's gonna farm, figuratively speaking. Now, if you're saying, hey, that sounds familiar, it's because this whole conversation between Hiro and Wu Fei could be playing with the song Old Snake from Metal Gear Solid 4 playing in the background, and it would fit. Because what Wu Fei's talking about is basically the same philosophy that leads Big Boss to founding Military Sans Frontier, the Diamond Dogs, Outer Heaven, and Zanzibar Land in the Metal Gear Solid franchise. Though the character has basically been a meme throughout these videos, he kind of has a point here. How the fuck can you expect a guy like him to just become like a dock worker or a circus performer like Hiro or Troa? It's something that he just has no answer to, and even though Treize is dead, Wu Fei feels like he's still fighting him. That, for him, the war never ended. On Earth, the battle couple of Zex and Noin are out in their mobile suits fighting against Marimea's army, trying their best not to kill their opponents. We also get a really touching moment where Noin basically says that when she told Zex she'd never leave his side, she meant it. I mean, she has been waiting on him for a whole year now. I imagine she's very pent up. Anyway, the fight continues with Wu Fei and Hiro, with Hiro making the point that all Marimea is going to do is start all this nonsense that they just went through a year prior all over again. And if you think about it, what she is effectively doing is making a new Oz. And we all know how that ended up. Tyranny, revolution, cycle begins again. So the question is, how many more people need to die at this point?
How many more times must I kill that girl and her dog?
Now, Hiro just gives up the fight, having taken a lot of damage to Wing Zero, letting Zero crash into the ocean. Wu Fei then flashes back to the destruction of his home colony, and he realizes that he's fucked up. Now, I often have people bring this fight up as Wu Fei trouncing Hiro, but I kind of feel like some people miss the point of the fight. It's not supposed to be this knockdown, drag-out fucking boxing match. It is a really good fight, ridiculously well animated like the rest of the goddamn movie, but it's not really about who wins like a boxing match. It's not like they're fighting over a championship belt or some sort of a Gundam fight. No, stop that! We'll do G Gundam another time. The fact is that Hiro doesn't want to see a comrade of his go down the road of murder again. He doesn't himself want to constantly have to revisit the crimes that he's committed and the innocents that he's killed. In a sense, by getting Wu Fei to stop, he has accomplished his mission with flying colors. Though that was at the expense of Wing Zero getting pretty beat up. Now out in space, Death Scythe, Sandrock, and Heavy Arms have arrived outside of Earth, and they descend in their own operation. Zex and Noin are having success in regard to their attacks, but only to a certain degree. Keep in mind that it was kind of a surprise attack, and now they are going to be sending reinforcements to where they're at. Somewhere else, the president of Earth is somewhere else with his granddaughter, lamenting the fact that so few people would want to stand up against a military like what Marimea has when they already have peace. As he says, not as many people are as sensible as his granddaughter. Now, at this point, Noin and Zex are struggling, but luckily for them, Backup is here. Sandrock starts the salvo off, making quick work of 5 of the serpents. In the sky, Deathscythe appears, dropping a few of them with no problem. Heavy Arms flips into action and reenacts the coolest scene from Predator on a bunch of them. This time using ammo that's clearly only meant to maim the suits, not cause them to blow up. Each pilot has 50 suits they need to drop between the 5 of them there, which is a hell of a fight. On top of that, they are trying not to kill anyone, which makes it that much more difficult. Marimea seems to think that it's meaningless because they can't puncture her shelter, so they can't even get to the head of the serpent. Relina tries to get a message out to the people, but it gets cut off. While the Gundams, the Tall Geese, and the Virgo keep fighting, they're taking a hell of a beating. Zex tries to tell them to retreat, but Duo, Catra, and Troa are fully committed to possibly dying to stop the revolution from continuing. It sadly just gets to a point that the Gundams have nothing left. They have effectively lost, but something's here. You see, back in the ocean, Wing Zero woke up Hiro in another one of those moments that makes you think whether or not this suit is self-aware. The two of them, despite the damage to the suit from Ultron, have one final mission: take out the head of the serpent. So, they've arrived above Marimea's shelter with the Buster Rifle pointed down. Now, Marimea and Dakim talk some shit, saying that Hiro is powerless. When he asks if their bunker is secure, they hear the 2 words that you don't want to hear from Hiro Yui, especially after you've been talking some shit.
Roger that.
Remember the rule of Hiro, kids. If he says, "I'll kill you," that's a warning. If he says, "Mission accepted," or "Roger that," you are fucking dead. At this point, when Marimea starts losing her mind, Relina smugly asks if she's afraid. Now, unfortunately for Zero, it's so damaged that it can't handle the recoil from the Buster Rifle under gravity. Because keep in mind, we've never actually seen Wing Zero fight in gravity in this show, except for a couple of instances, and it was at full strength at the time. With all this damage, handling that kind of recoil is very difficult. Now, one thing he does do when he's told Relina's there is lower his Buster Rifle, but he realizes as the Marimea troops open fire on him that this needs to end. So he adjusts his aim a bit, and then fires the Buster Rifle one more time. He manages to bust the bunker, but sadly, we see the fall of an angel, as Wing Zero explodes. In the remains of the presidential palace, after Hiro has busted the bunker, Lady Un has managed to get there to shield Relina and Marimea from falling rubble. At this point, Wu Fei has shown up, and on top of that, has all of the citizenry behind him, which, oddly enough, was actually rallied to stand up against Marimea by Dorothy Catalonia, of all people. And they're all telling her to piss off, and they're not going to stand for this bullshit. At this point, Noin basically reiterates why Treize fought losing battles, and why people are standing with the Gundams. Because it's not always victories that move the hearts of people. This is exactly why Treize said he wanted to be a loser, and he admired the Gundam pilots so much, and why the manga for the Endless Waltz timeline is called Glory of the Losers. Yeah, they were capable of winning, but they were willing to lose if it meant that they could achieve their final goal of peace. What they now have is a world that desires peace and is willing to live in a peaceful world, but with people inside of it that will stand up to anyone that wants to take that peace away from them. While Marimea is clearly in a state of shock at losing this battle, Relina smacks Marimea in the face, stopping Lady Un from doing it, but does start to talk her down after the little girl starts coming to her senses. At this point, Dakim pulls a gun on Relina, but she calls his bluff. But that was not a good call, and Dakim is very willing to kill her. And he fires, but Marimea takes the shot for her. After seeing this, as Dakim prepares to fire another shot, where he declares he could just create another Marimea, which I don't think he's literal, I think he means like creating another figurehead. I do actually think that this is Treize's daughter. I think that was the author's intention. But anyway, Dakim is executed by one of the soldiers, whose voice is familiar, but I don't know who this guy is supposed to be. But he apologizes for effectively turning on Treize's intentions. And I think it's safe to say that by killing Dakim Barton, all's forgiven, dude. After all that, Hiro appears, offering to end Marimea's life, and then pulls the trigger on his gun, which isn't loaded. But at this point, he says that she's dead. Which, effectively, given what you're going to see in a minute, is him saying that they're going to use that as a cover story that he killed her. But at this point, Hiro says, I don't have to kill anybody anymore. And he passes out from exhaustion. And Relina is nice enough to lend Hiro a couple of pillows. Okay, that's a bad joke, but effectively, this is the end of the conflict. Noin gets Marimea some medical attention, and Hiro and Relina get to finally share a moment together. Aww. Anyway, the Gundam pilots detonate Sandrock, Death's Scythe, and Heavy Arms, and just go back to their lives. Wu Fei, back in China, does the exact same thing with Ultron, saying goodbye to Nitaku. Sally Poe is there with him and invites him to come work as a preventer, which he agrees to. As for Zex and Noin, they're headed out to help Relina with a terraforming project. And in After Colony 197, peace has returned to the world. After this, the weapons called Gundams were never seen again. Never again! Frozen Teardrop does not happen. No. In all seriousness, though, this brings us to a close of our exploration of Gundam Wing and the breaking down of the lore of it all. I have to say a big thank you to all you guys who waited patiently for this final episode, and all of you who hung out with Shirt Dude and I as we got to explore what's basically my favorite anime ever. As you can tell by my long diatribes of this series, I really love the After Colony timeline and the characters inside of it. So to close this out, the one thing that I kind of find interesting the more I think about it is that this is my favorite anime, and my favorite video game series is Metal Gear Solid. Both stories are ones that deal with the idea of achieving peace, throwing war away, and what needs to happen to get there. The conclusion that gets reached by both Metal Gear and Gundam Wing, and also many stories in the Universal Century, is that ultimately conflict is a choice. If we as people are ever going to live in a time without conflict, we've got to toss away the idea of war as an answer, and instead realize that the only way we're going to progress is if we're willing to communicate. It's a message that's always going to vibe with me because I really believe that it's true. If we open ourselves up and are willing to throw away pointless conflict, we will grow. If you do it in the micro in your daily life, your life improves. Suddenly there's less drama. Suddenly there's more focus on the things that actually fucking matter. And if we do it in the macro, the whole of humanity will move forward. Okay, that's enough about me being sentimental and waxing about war stories and giant robots. Let me just say thank you to everyone that supports the work that we do at this channel. If you'd like to become a channel member or a patron to support us and help keep the lights on, you can do so through the links in the description, or becoming a YouTube channel member. With all that said, my name is Micah Curtis, your favorite vanilla gorilla. We'll see you guys very soon for more Gundam stuff. Until then, have yourselves a great day.